it's all the way we frame it, and there's stories all around us and in us. As a young boy growing up, my father used to take me out on fishing trips on Saturday mornings, early Saturday mornings. Now, my father was a grumpy, gruff old man, but on Saturday mornings, he was transformed when he took me out in the old Ford pickup. And we would drive these country roads and go up to an old abandoned lumber camp road, at the end of which was a brook, and we'd go fishing there. And all along the way, I'd be mesmerized by my father. I was about 9 or 10 at the time. And he would tell me stories about the places we passed by, giving history of the places. He would tell me really droll and amusing stories about the people he worked with. And so that was actually the beginning of it. And working through Toastmasters, with friends, you're sharing stories all the time. It was with Toastmaster, it was just a little bit more formal, sitting down and writing those stories out.
Thank you. So I noticed when you do your speeches, you tend to act out your story. You don't just tell the story. Your body language tells the story. You tend to act out the story and take us on a journey. Is there any background that led you to acting out the story?
Oh, yes, definitely. The easy answer is I studied acting for 4 years, Los Angeles City College Theater Academy, and then I was involved as an actor for a few years after that, doing small roles and some a little not so small, but that having that background, I incorporated it into my speeches. As an artist, I think probably I don't know when I first really started thinking of myself as an artist, but I know I was doing drawings and doodlings from a very, very early age. And somewhere along the line, the tag artist became part of my persona. But it was basically that my theater background that describes was the catalyst from my really animating my speeches.
Okay, so for some of us who are not as sapient as you are in the storytelling arena, and we are challenged with finding the right story to go into our speech that we're saying, if we bring it into the Toastmaster, and how you could maybe coach us a little bit. How do you decide which story to layer into your speeches?
I think if you've heard a number of my speeches, you'll recognize that they're all very pretty simple. I mean, they're like ordinary everyday things. It just heightened through because they affected me. And so, look to your own experiences to tell the story. Find the humor in it, even if it's a serious story. I think it should always have a flavor of humor in it. It actually, if you're telling a serious story and you have humor in it, it makes the audience more receptive to the serious parts.
That's great. That's something great I can take, and hopefully someone else can as well. I see that your stories always tend to connect. They always tend to connect to what you're talking about, even if it appears that you're talking about something completely different. I remember you told the story about the woman only wanting to date Ernest, and the story ending up in another direction at the end. And I thought that was so skillful, and I personally can learn from that. How do you connect the story so well to your speech?
I don't do this entirely, but I attended a workshop from a world champion Toastmaster speaker, Dan Njaya. I believe he won in 2014. and he gave an incredible workshop. But one of the things in fact, it was one of the first things he said was to write out your theme or what the story is about, and if possible, write it in rhyme. And he said it should be so simple that even a 9-year-old could understand it. And that's a great connecting point, because if you got that down, wherever you're going in the speech, it's got to relate to that.
Wow. Give me a moment. I want to take a couple of notes. I think that's fantastic. So if there were 3 tips that you could leave us with, you and I talked about the power of 3, and we both agreed that number is very powerful and it could leave us in a great space. So if there were 3 tips or techniques that you could leave us with that are simple enough for us to implement into our speeches, what would that be?
Okay. I may do more than 3, but we'll definitely be working with that power of 3. The very first thing is, once you've got is a practice. 3, I'm saying it 3 times, but that's you're going to be more and more. The more you practice, the more confident you're going to be. It's almost a given. That's number 1. Number 2, have a fabulous opening. If you're going to rework anything, rework that opening. You want it to grab your audience right from the beginning, because they can forgive some mistakes if you've got them right from the very beginning. But you got an uphill battle if your opening is weak. And I'm going to share another tip from the Dhananjaya, the world champion of speaking, and this relates to the power of 3. He described the hero's journey as a process of creating an international speech, and he compared it to a clock with the numbers from 12 to 1 going all the way back to 12. And he said the start of the clock, you're at 12, and that's your quest. At quarter after, you experience your obstacles. At the half hour, you're at your lowest point, and then at the quarter 2, something comes to intervene to get you past that lower point. Quite often it's a mentor or an outside source, someone giving you the information or the courage that you need. And then the end is either succeeding in your quest or learning something from the failure of your quest. At the lowest point, he had this technique to heighten the intensity of the speech. And there were 3 things. We're talking about the power of 3. And those 3 things, you might have heard it in one of my speeches. In fact, the last speech I did, I used it. I saw, I heard, I felt. You describe that at your lowest moment. And they invoke all the senses. So the audience is totally wrapped up and involved in it, because you're creating a sensory experience for them. I saw, I felt, I heard. You just fill in the blanks, whatever you saw, whatever you felt, whatever you heard, contingent upon what the thing you're describing at the time.
There you go.
So those are all my tips. I think that's...
Thank you. That is fantastic. So thank you for sharing that power of 3, and I definitely wrote it down. So number 1 being practice. And I believe that all of us can really take that on. Number 2 being have a fabulous opening, and you always have a striking opening. So I take that from you. And then number 3 is to use the hero's journey. And thank you for explaining the hero's journey. I just drew a little clock here to remind myself. and that dip. I remember Lisa Nichols said that low point would be a dip. That's the way she explained it when I went to one of her seminars, and she used that I saw, I heard, I felt. So this is validation on that we can use that. Thank you for sharing that with us. Is there anything else that you would want to leave us with to help us build a great story and weave it within our speeches as we go forward in giving our speeches on our quest to DTN?
Yes, back to the power of three. In the opening, to have a powerful opening, you can use different techniques. One of the most common ones is a question. The question being, you're asking the question to the audience so that you automatically draw the audience in. You can also start with a story. Sometimes it's great to start in the middle of the story because it leaves the audience a little off balance and draws them out the curiosity about where you're going with that. And the third is some startling fact, which also can catch the audience. So those are three things.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. So you all heard it yourselves from Michael himself, the masterful storyteller. I absolutely love to hear him give his speeches. I love to hear him talk about his siblings and his childhood and take us on that journey. Michael, thank you for taking the time to share some of your tips with us.
Thank you for asking me. I appreciate it.
Madam Toastmaster.
I can't do